Okay, next, let's focus in a little bit deeper on one of the main musical things, probably the main musical thing happening at the time that at least that we know about, and that is chant. So let's go. We've talked a little bit about chant up till now. So let's dive a little bit deeper and really kind of get into the guts of what was happening with chant. Okay? So there were a few different kinds of chant, and how we define chant is a little tricky because we could say it. There's some that was using like many notes per syllable. I'll talk more about that in a second. And there was some that was done in like a call and response style, and that gets its own category. So there's basically a lot of different categories, but then there was a lot of it that was mixing different categories together. It had a lot to do with the liturgy and what was required for different services in the church. So let's kind of break it up into two groups. First, the way that it was performed. There's kind of three categories and sort of a fourth. Okay, so there was a kind of chant that was responsive, meaning the singers, the people doing the chant, usually monks or someone similar, they would sing something, and then the congregation would respond by singing the same thing, right? It's not all that different than how a lot of churches work today in some call and response type settings. There was another type of performance that was called antiphonal, which kind of meant there's two halves of a choir. The monks that were chanting were split in half, and one would sing and then the other would sing, and then one would sing and then the other would sing, and they'd go back and forth. Now, this word antiphonal is kind of interesting because we've used that word all the way up into the 20th century to mean splitting musically something into two parts and then having them perform separately, right? So this word antiphonal goes all the way back to Gregorian chant, but it's still somewhat used. It's not used so much anymore. But for example, back in the days of Mahler, he experimented a lot with antiphonal strings, where he would take the orchestra and put half the strings on the left side and half the strings on the right side to create this effect of the sound going back and forth between the two. But that's very, very, very much later than what we're talking about now. But that word antiphonal sticks around for quite a while. Third way of performance was just called direct, in which the singers would just sing, and there's no response or alteration or anything like that. And then the kind of fourth way is that sometimes they would mix it up and combine several things together, right? There wasn't a really strict format for that. So those were kind of the three different performance methods that we saw. Now, another way we can classify this is in how the text was treated. Because remember, these singers have to be singing words, right? That's one of the things singers need. Not always, actually, but most of the time. Singers need words. At this period in history, they definitely needed words to sing. But they had a lot of them, right? Because they had the Psalms and they had pretty much everything in the Bible. So let's talk about how they treated text in the next video.